You know, we tend to think of our bodies a lot like a smartphone battery.
Right, like it's just this simple mechanical thing.
Exactly. You use it throughout the day, the percentage drops down into the red, and then you just plug it into a charger.
Right.
And maybe that charger is, a good night's sleep or a solid workout, and boom, you wake up back at 100%.
It's a very industrial way of looking at human biology. I mean, the idea that input always equals output, rest automatically equals recovery.
Yeah, it is simple. It's linear,
Yeah.
and honestly, it is just very comforting to think of our energy that way. But what if the battery indicator on your screen is actively lying to you?
That's the scary part, really.
Right. What if the very act of plugging your phone into the wall didn't charge it, but actually, I don't know, caused the motherboard to melt down?
Which is exactly what we're getting into today.
Yes, it is. Because today we are taking a deep dive into the absolute extremes of the human energy economy. We're looking at how our bodies create energy, how we spend it, and, well, what happens when the entire biological system just completely crashes.
And to explore that, we are synthesizing two highly contrasting yet surprisingly complementary sources today.
We really are. So, on one hand, we have this cutting-edge immunology review. It was published in April 2026 in Frontiers in Immunology.
Right.
And the title is a bit of a mouthful, actually. It's Pathophysiological Mechanisms of Post-Exertional Malaise, an integrative analysis based on the metabolism-immune-neuro interaction model.
Yeah, it's quite the title. It's a very heavy microscopic look at cellular collapse.
Super dense. And then on the other hand, we have this deeply practical philosophical manual called Shibashi Energy Gates and Acupoints by Sifu Peter Eves.
Which outlines an ancient Qigong practice for cultivating and moving energy.
Yeah. And, they seem entirely unrelated at first glance.
Oh, completely. I mean, a clinical pathology paper and a manual on ancient Eastern movement.
Exactly. But when you lay them side by side, the parallels and how they view energy regulation are incredibly revealing.
They really are.
So that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to map out the exact cellular cascade that causes the debilitating exhaustion known as post-exertional malaise, or PM.
Right.
And then we're going to cross-reference that microscopic breakdown with an ancient philosophy of managing energy flow. And by the end of this, I promise you, you're going to rethink every single movement you make.
It really shifts your entire perspective.
It totally does. So let's start with the biology. For you, me, if we go for a jog, it feels good.
Sure.
It builds endurance. But for someone with PM, which is very commonly seen in conditions like long COVID or ME/CFS, that same jog is devastating.
Devastating, yeah.
So why is exercise a paradox here?
Well, to understand the paradox, we first have to understand what exercise actually does to a healthy cell. Exercise creates a state called mitohormesis.
Anohormesis, okay.
Yeah. Essentially, exercise is not a gentle building process, right? It actually induces a toxic excitatory effect.
Wait, really?
Toxic. Exactly. It causes a temporary spike in oxidative stress inside the cell, releasing these reactive oxygen species.
Oh, okay, I see.
So in a healthy body, this mild toxic stress acts as a chemical signal. It tells the body to, upregulate antioxidant defenses and build more mitochondria to handle the load next time.
Right, so it is the biological cellular version of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Precisely. The stress itself is the signal to fortify the system.
But I'm guessing in PM, that doesn't happen.
No. In patients suffering from post-exertional malaise, that fundamental adaptive capacity is just broken. The cell cannot effectively restore its mitochondrial balance after the stress.
Wow.
And the Frontiers paper outlines this breakdown using what they call the two-hit model.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly are the two hits?
So hit number one is usually an infection or an environmental toxin. In the case of long COVID, for instance, the body might harbor lingering pathogen-associated molecular patterns.
That's a lot of syllables.
Right, we call them PMPs for short.
Yeah.
We can think of these as viral ghosts.
Viral ghosts, I like that.
Yeah, they're leftover fragments of a virus, like spike proteins that refuse to clear out. And this first hit primes the immune system.
Okay.
It leaves the immune network in the state of hypervigilance, establishing a highly vulnerable baseline.
So the immune system is essentially standing guard, weapon drawn, just waiting for a fight that never really ends.
That's exactly it. And then comes the second hit, which is routine exercise.
Just normal exercise.
Right. But because the immune system is already primed and the mitochondria are vulnerable, the exercise doesn't trigger that healthy mitohormesis signal we talked about.
It doesn't send the build back stronger signal.
No, instead it causes catastrophic mitochondrial stress. The mitochondria actually fracture.
Defracture, like break apart.
Yes. They fracture and start leaking their own DNA into the main body of the cell, creating what are called damage-associated molecular patterns, or DAMPs.
Man, it's like a home security system.
Oh, so.
Well, the first hit, that lingering viral infection, it wires the alarm panel to be hypersensitive. Like
Yeah.
the motion sensors are dialed all the way up to maximum sensitivity.
Right.
Then the second hit comes along, which is just you opening a window in your living room to let in a nice spring breeze.
Hmm.
But the system misreads it.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, it triggers the whole neighborhood to lock down. The police are called, the sirens are blaring, the doors lock automatically, and it's all because of a breeze.
That is a perfect analogy, and what's fascinating here is how perfectly that explains why the standard medical advice of, just push through it or exercise your way back to health
Yeah.
is actually biologically destructive for PM patients.
Because it's just triggering more alarms.
Exactly. Forcing the body through an exercise routine just generates more of those leaked molecular patterns, which triggers more security alarms, pushing the system further into a pathological self-destructing cycle.
Unbelievable. So let's zoom in on what is actually happening inside the cells during this neighborhood lockdown, because the paper describes a sort of cellular energy heist.
Yes, a heist is a good way to put it.
It isn't just that the cell runs out of fuel, right? Like a car running out of gas.
Hmm.
The actual resources of the body are being actively hijacked.
Right. The energy deficit hypothesis used to just rely on the simple idea that the mitochondria are damaged, so energy synthesis drops and therefore the muscle gets tired.
Which makes sense on the surface.
It does, but that doesn't explain a hallmark symptom of PAM.
Yeah.
Why patients often experience immediate painful muscle weakness and spasms long before their cellular energy is actually depleted.
Right, they feel it instantly.
Exactly. And the paper points to a massive failure of a very specific cellular mechanism, the sodium-potassium pump.
Okay, hold on. A sodium-potassium pump. I vaguely remember that from high school biology. But how does its failure lead to the immediate weakness you're talking about?
So every cell in your body is essentially a tiny battery. It maintains an electrical charge across its membrane by constantly pumping sodium out and pulling potassium in.
Okay.
That difference in charge is what allows a muscle to fire. So when this pump fails, which it does in PM due to oxidative stress and those molecular alarm bells ringing, the cell membrane depolarizes.
Meaning the electrical charge drops.
Yes, and this causes an immediate catastrophic loss of muscle excitability.
So the muscle physically cannot receive the signal to contract? The wiring is dead.
The wiring is dead, and it causes a secondary disaster.
Of course it does.
When the membrane loses its charge, calcium absolutely floods into the cells. Now, calcium is normally tightly regulated, but this flood causes structural damage to the mitochondria.
Oh.
So the immediate weakness, the heavy limbs, the painful spasms, it is an electrical failure and an ion flood happening way before the fuel tank is actually empty.
But the body doesn't just stop there, does it? Because of all these leaked mitochondrial fragments and lingering viral ghosts, the immune system decides to escalate things.
Oh, it escalates dramatically. The cell activates a complex called the NLRP3 inflammasome.
The inflammasome.
Right, which triggers a massive systemic immune response. But, fighting a war requires a vast amount of energy, so the immune system essentially overrides normal cellular function and forces the cells to undergo immune metabolic reprogramming.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm tracking this. It forces the cells to change how they actually create energy.
Yes, exactly. Normally, cells use oxygen to create energy very efficiently, but the immune system demands immediate fast fuel.
Right.
So it forces the cells to abandon their highly efficient oxygen-based process and switch to a highly inefficient method called glycolysis.
Wait, let me stop you there. So the immune system shifts everything to glycolysis and steals all the glucose for this phantom war. Is that why people with PEM feel physically drained, even if they haven't moved an inch?
Okay.
Because the immune system is essentially acting incredibly selfishly with the body's energy supply.
It's a complete hijacking. The immune system hoards the glucose to fight a battle that was triggered by the mere act of, say, taking a walk or doing a load of laundry.
That is wild.
It leaves the muscles, the organs, and the rest of the body completely starved. And to make matters worse, glycolysis is like burning your furniture to heat your house instead of using the furnace.
Fast but messy.
Very messy. It's fast, but it is inefficient, and it leaves a toxic mess behind. In this case, that mess is massive amounts of lactate.
And that lactate building up in the tissues just further poisons the local mitochondria.
Yes, it's a vicious loop.
It is terrifying when you think about it on a microscopic level. But the symptoms of PM aren't just physical exhaustion and muscle pain. Right. A huge complaint from patients is severe cognitive dysfunction, brain fog.
Right, absolutely.
The inability to concentrate, memory lapses, or just struggling to find basic words. So if all this cellular chaos and electrical failure is happening in the peripheral muscles, how does it make its way up to the brain?
Well, the systemic release of inflammatory proteins from that cellular war actually travels through the bloodstream and starts to attack the brain's defenses.
Oh, no.
Specifically, it degrades tight junction proteins. Think of these proteins as the mortar between the bricks of a fortress wall. When the mortar dissolves, the blood-brain barrier becomes compromised.
So the protective seal around the brain literally starts to leak.
Yes. The permeability increases, allowing peripheral inflammatory signals to breach the central nervous system.
Wow.
Additionally, these inflammatory signals travel directly up the vagus nerve, which acts as this massive communication highway between the gut, the organs, and the brain.
Right, the vagus nerve.
And once these signals get inside, they wake up the brain's internal security guards. Glial cells, specifically microglia and astrocytes.
And once the brain's security guards realize there's a massive fire happening in the body, what do?
They initiate a state of sustained neuroinflammation. We can actually visually see this inflammation on advanced brain scans long after any initial viral infection is gone.
That's incredible.
It is. But crucially, this neuroinflammation heavily targets a specific region of the brain called the insular cortex.
Okay, why does it matter that the insular cortex is hit? What does that part of the brain actually do?
So the insular cortex is the primary hub of the brain's interoceptive network.
Interoceptive, meaning internal perception.
Exactly. Interoception is your brain's ability to perceive and integrate internal signals from your physical body. It is the dashboard that tells you when you are hungry, when you are in pain, or when you are fatigued.
Okay, I follow you.
So when neuroinflammation hits the insular cortex, the dashboard breaks. You get a profound interoceptive mismatch.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like the brain's IT department detects a minor glitch, like a little bit of metabolic stress from a short walk. But because the whole nervous system is inflamed and the dashboard is broken, they misread it as a massive, catastrophic system hack.
That's a great way to look at it.
So they pull the plug on the main server to protect the hardware. They trigger a protective inhibition that literally forces you into bed.
Exactly. The brain interprets the systemic inflammation and the peripheral energy depletion as an overwhelming existential threat. So to protect itself from further damage, it enforces a complete behavioral shutdown.
And that is the brain fog.
That is the brain fog. That is the crushing cognitive fatigue. It is not just that the brain's neurons are lacking energy. It is that the brain is actively suppressing your ability to think or move to conserve whatever tiny fraction of resources are left.
Man, we have spent a lot of time mapping out the absolute breakdown of the body's energy management. And it is a grim picture, honestly, of microscopic traffic jams, failing electrical pumps, and an immune system that is completely sabotaging its host.
It's very intense.
So we've established that forcing the body to move through this state causes an inflammatory lockdown, which begs the question, how do you regulate or move energy when physical movement itself is toxic?
Right.
And that leads us to an entirely different approach, exploring our other source today, the Shibashi Manual by Sifu Peter Eves.
It is such a striking contrast. Because while the immunology paper details the cascading failures of energy regulation, Shibashi is a practice designed entirely around smoothing out energy flow without crossing the threshold into physical stress.
Yeah, Shibashi literally translates to 18 postures. It is an ancient Qigong form based on Tai Chi principles, and it's deeply focused on breath, alignment, and intention.
Right.
And according to the manual, the human body has 5 major energy gates where it exchanges qi, or vital energy, with the outside world.
And the manual places immense importance on these 5 gates. You have the Baihui, located at the very crown of the head, known in traditional Chinese medicine as the 100 convergences. Then you have the 2 Laogong points, located right in the center of your palms, and you have the 2 Yangquan points, located on the soles of your feet.
The translation for Yangquan is bubbling spring, which is just such a visceral image. It is where you supposedly connect with the Earth's energy.
Yes.
So you have these 5 specific anatomical gates. What is the practitioner actually doing with them?
The core philosophy of Qigong is to efficiently regulate the flow of qi through these gates and throughout the body's meridian system. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, in traditional Chinese medicine, illness is almost always viewed as an excess, a depletion, or a stagnation of qi.
A stagnation of qi. That word stagnation really jumps out.
Doesn't it? When you look at the concept of stagnation, it remarkably mirrors the modern molecular traffic jams we just discussed in the Frontiers paper.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Buildup of toxic lactate from glycolysis, the intracellular flood of calcium, the mitochondria fracturing because they cannot clear out reactive oxygen species. From a biological standpoint, all of that is a severe form of stagnation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we know that intense exercise, the second hit, causes PEM patients to crash because it triggers that massive inflammatory response.
Yeah.
But Shibashi relies on incredibly gentle, fluid, wave-like movements, synchronized with deep abdominal breathing. So if the goal is clearing stagnation, could this be the exact type of movement that avoids triggering that toxic second hit?
I think so, yes. The wave-like motions are specifically engineered to stimulate circulation both of blood and of qi without ever crossing the threshold into oxidative stress.
That's the key.
Right. By focusing attention on the energy gates rather than focusing on muscular exertion, the practitioner is engaging the nervous system without demanding massive amounts of cellular fuel or initiating that damaging glycolysis process.
And the manual emphasizes that Shibashi is not just, waving your arms around, mimicking a fluid motion. It is deeply dependent on what the mind is doing.
Yes. The foundational concept here is yi. In Qigong, yi translates to intention or will. It is described as the thinking energy that happens right before a physical action occurs. It is the mental impulse. The practice trains your yi to direct the physical flow of qi.
The manual breaks this down into some very specific postures, actually. Take the first movement, for example, wave hands. As you raise your arms, you are instructed to focus your yi entirely on the Yangquan points on your feet.
Right, the bubbling springs.
Right. Visualizing drawing up earth qi. Then as your hands lower, your mental focus shifts completely to the Laogong points on your palms, with the specific intention of depositing that energy into the stomach meridian on your thighs.
And through the lens of traditional Chinese medicine, that precise mental focus helps settle the liver qi, which is associated with anger and frustration when blocked.
That makes a lot of sense.
Or consider the second movement, expand the chest. You extend your arms forward and then open them wide. The instruction isn't just about stretching muscles. It is to focus on the Laogong points on your palms facing each other, vividly imagining a stretchable string pulling taut between them.
Which the manual says strengthens the heart and lungs. It physically opens the chest cavity, which naturally facilitates deeper oxygenation without straining the heart rate.
Exactly.
There's also a movement called repulse the monkey. You extend an arm to the side and bring the hand directly towards your ear. You align the Laogong gate on your palm with a specific acupoint on your other hand and use your intention to deposit qi to the side of your face to clear headaches.
It's very targeted.
Yeah, the physical movement itself is tiny, almost negligible. But the mental focus, the yi, is highly engaged.
And this raises an important question, because we discussed earlier how the Frontiers paper noted that vagus nerve stimulation can actually mitigate central brain inflammation.
Right, the superhighway to the brain.
Right. There is a documented neural pathway called the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway, where peripheral immune signals are essentially told to stand down.
Wait, so if Shibashi is pairing these very minimal, gentle movements with deep, relaxed abdominal breathing, which is a well-documented way to stimulate the vagus nerve, and combining it with this highly focused mental intention, or yi,
Yes.
could this ancient practice be acting as a physiological manual override to soothe the vagus nerve and halt the inflammatory loop we saw in the immune cells?
The synthesis of the two sources points strongly in that direction, absolutely. The deep, rhythmic breathing of Qigong engages the parasympathetic nervous system, sending potent anti-inflammatory signals down that exact cholinergic pathway to the immune system.
That is just incredible.
And furthermore, the intense mental focus required to maintain Yi essentially demands that the brain shift its cognitive resources away from the threat detection mode of the interoceptive network.
Oh, because it's so busy focusing on the gates.
Exactly. You are giving the insular cortex a new, calming, highly specific signal to process, rather than allowing it to fixate on the amplified danger signals of systemic inflammation.
It's brilliant. We think back to the biological mechanism. The cells in a PM patient are basically revving their engines in neutral.
Right.
The immune system is burning all the glucose, creating toxic exhaust like lactate, and causing massive structural damage, all while the car goes nowhere.
A perfect storm of damage.
But with a practice like Shibashi, instead of revving the engine harder to try and clear the exhaust out the tailpipe, which just burns fuel you don't have and damages the motor, you are turning off the engine entirely.
You're stepping out of the vehicle.
You are getting out of the car,
Yeah.
and you are gently sweeping out the garage. You are moving energy using intention and breath without spending your precious physical battery.
Exactly. By using intention rather than exertion, the practitioner respects the severe biological limits imposed by the condition. But they're still actively working to clear the internal stagnation.
Right.
Whether modern science calls that clearing lactate buildup, or ancient philosophy calls it unblocking stagnant qi.
We have covered incredible ground today. We started by looking at the microscopic horror show of post-exertional malaise.
Yeah, horror show is right.
We saw how a lingering viral ghost can prime the immune system, turning a simple walk into a toxic event. We tracked how failing electrical pumps and a reprogrammed immune system can literally starve the body of energy, and how that inflammation dissolves the blood-brain barrier to trigger an interoceptive lockdown in the brain.
And then we explored how an ancient practice like Shibashi offers a completely different blueprint for interacting with those physical limits. By focusing on the 5 major energy gates and utilizing the power of Yi, or intention, it offers a mechanism to stimulate the vagus nerve, calm the inflammatory response, and move energy without triggering the devastating cellular crash.
We live in a culture that absolutely glorifies pushing through the pain. We are taught that if the battery is low, you just need to plug it into a higher voltage charger, dig deep, and force it to work.
It's what we're all told.
But based on everything we learned today, what if true resilience isn't about how hard you can force your body to work against its own alarms? What if true resilience is actually about how masterfully you can use your intention, your gimme, to navigate your own energy limits? Something to think about the next time you feel like your battery is running on empty. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.